I've been to hell. I was there for 28 minutes. It was in May 2018, and it was an experience I will never forget. As soon as I realized where I was, visions of fire, intolerable screeching, and demons cursing my name filled my mind. Many people over the years have described near-death experiences where they are filled with an indescribable sense of peace, see a white light, and are overwhelmed with a love so profound that it can't be defined in human terms. That wasn't my experience. There are also near-death experiences where someone goes to a hellish place with the traditional fire, brimstone, and torture that is well documented and preached in many churches. That wasn't my experience either. You see, what I went through on that day in 2018 wasn't even a near-death experience. I didn't die. I didn't even lose consciousness. I was completely awake, in full health, and right here on planet Earth. The place I visited was a place called Gehenna, just outside the old city of Jerusalem. Also called the Valley of Hinnom, it was a place I visited as part of a tour of the Holy Land. It's also the place that Jesus was referring to when he spoke about hell. That's right, hell, as Jesus spoke about it, is actually a place on earth. You can visit it too. Unfortunately, because of evangelical church teaching, many of us over the years have become convinced that when Jesus talked about this place called hell, he was talking about a fiery, indescribably painful place of eternal torment for people who have rejected him in this life. He wasn't, and he never did. Jesus spoke more about, wait. A popular belief in many churches is that Jesus spoke more about hell than he did about anything else. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, Jesus hardly ever referred to an afterlife at all in any of his teachings. Going through the sayings of Jesus that seem to refer to an afterlife is outside the scope of this article, so the best reference I can point you to is a book by Keith Giles called Jesus Undefeated, Condemning the False Doctrine of Eternal Torment. There are many other good references to look at regarding this topic as well, but Keith's book is the one I would recommend the most. So if Jesus didn't talk about hell, let alone an afterlife, what was he referring to in those seemingly clear verses that mention such things? What Jesus was referring to was that place I visited in May 2018. It was that place called Gehenna. It used to be a garbage dump and a place where people would sacrifice children. It was indeed horrific. It was known as the place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, the worms never die, and the fire never goes out. Have you heard that saying before? That's right. It's exactly what Jesus calls it in the Gospels. And Jesus was using the words that the prophet Jeremiah used hundreds of years before when he warned the people of God what would happen if they continued in their wicked ways. And Jeremiah said those words while actually standing in Gehenna. When Jesus talked about it, he was warning the religious leaders in particular about what would happen if they continued to reject him as Messiah. And the destruction he was referring to was not an eternal fiery torment, but the destruction of Jerusalem that would happen about 40 years later when the city was sacked by the Romans. What's more, when Jesus used these words, the disciples with him understood that he was using very common language from the Hebrew Scriptures, our Old Testament. How did we get from Jesus referring to a garbage dump outside Jerusalem to us believing in the eternal, conscious torment of people who refuse to accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior? The good people over at Brazen Church point out that many Christians insist that if you question hell, you are rejecting what has always been agreed upon by the church. Yet the doctrine of eternal torment was not a widely held view for the first 5 centuries after Christ, particularly in the early Eastern Church, the Church of the early apostles and church fathers such as Paul, Clement of Alexandria, Saint Gregory of Nyssa, Origen, and others. The idea of eternal conscious torment in a fiery place called hell was not a major church doctrine for the first 500 years of the church. That's right. For the first 500 years of the Christian movement, there was no major doctrine of eternal suffering in hell. Most Christians have no idea about that. Brazen Church goes on to talk about the expansion and proliferation of pagan myths about the afterlife, which were then repackaged as eternal, fiery torment in the Western Catholic Church, primarily by Latin theologians and church leaders from Rome. It seems this was most likely motivated by political expediency. The idea of eternal torment was a prime tool for controlling the average churchgoer with fear and was congruent with secular mythologies of the time. Later, pop culture added fuel to the fire, pun intended, through imaginative works like Dante's Inferno. This is all documented history. It's amazing the effect that such teaching has, and how it is normalized in the church to the point where we are numb to the absolute absurdity of it. That was certainly the case for me in my early years as a young Christian. When I was in my late teens, I used to go to Christian summer camps called coffee shops. They were basically evangelistic crusades, designed to convert people to become Christians. In the coffee shop itself, we had a stage with a huge banner at the back. The banner was a painting of an image taken from Matthew 7:13-14, where Jesus talks about the importance of going on the narrow road and not taking the wide road to destruction. You can probably see where I'm going with this, but for those who can't, you can see below what the banner showed. The narrow road was painted as winding and uphill, leading to a shining castle at the top. There were very few people on the narrow road. The wide road, on the other hand, had countless people on it, and they were all heading toward the edge of a cliff and falling over it where massive flames awaited them below. These depictions of heaven and a literal fiery hell of eternal conscious torment were designed to show you what your fate would be if you didn't accept Jesus into your heart and become a Christian. And I believed it. Today, I would never subject anyone to what I see as such an ungodly, unchristian belief. I no longer believe in the idea of hell as eternal, conscious torment. I don't think it's in the Bible, and I certainly don't think it reflects the character of the Jesus I have come to know. And as well as Jesus not referring to it, there is literally no record in the book of Acts about eternal suffering in a fiery afterlife called hell, let alone elsewhere in the Bible. I've just finished listening to the whole of Acts, and there are 8, some say 9, sermons given by the apostles in the book. Their main emphasis is to proclaim Jesus as Messiah, his death by crucifixion, and his resurrection. No mention of hell. Why is it then that if our eternal destiny is at stake in the most horrific way imaginable, the very apostles of Jesus at the very start of the Christian movement, as recorded in our very scriptures, don't mention a word of it? Not a word. They have either made the biggest blunder in history, or they are the biggest deceivers in history, or God is the biggest deceiver in history, or it's just not an issue. Surely it's the latter. Millions of Christians are trapped by their fear of hell. While religion has many good points about it, the fear it can produce is just abusive. As Jesus effectively said to the Pharisees, empty religion gets in the way of love. True spirituality is about surrendering to the overwhelming love of God and Jesus. I love Richard Rohr's quote, "Religion is for people who are afraid of hell. Spirituality is for people who have already experienced it." There is more we can say about this whole topic. That's why I recommended Keith Giles's book above. Another good one is Raising Hell by Julie Ferwerda. In the end, getting over the fear of hell comes down to the question of whether or not I am loved. That's the real issue. It's not actually about whether there is a real place in the afterlife, with flames where some people go to be tormented forever. You are loved unconditionally by the Creator of the universe. Embrace that, and you will know the eternal truth that perfect love casts out all fear. All of it.